Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive
Oh, yeah.
into insurance policies.
Diving right back in.
We are diving headfirst into Texas dwelling coverage.
Head first. That's right.
We're going to be looking at some stuff that'll make your head spin.
It is.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
We've got policies, we've got underwriting guidelines.
Buried in the details.
But lucky for you guys, we're here to break it all down.
That's right. We're here to help.
All right, so before we get too far, one of the things that I think we should probably define up front is this phrase, actual cash value.
Yes.
Because you see it everywhere.
Actual cash value.
It's in every single one
Sounds so simple.
of these documents.
Right.
But what does it actually mean?
It does sound simple, but it can be kind of misleading, I think, for the average consumer.
Yeah.
Because you think, oh, actual cash value, that just means what it's worth.
Right.
Not necessarily.
Not quite.
There's a little bit more to it than that.
Okay, so walk me through this.
Okay, so let's say, just as a, for instance, your roof gets damaged in a hailstorm.
Oh, no. No.
Classic Texas.
Happens all the time.
All the time, right. And a brand new roof, let's say, that would cost, I don't know, $10,000 to replace.
Oh,
But your roof is 10 years old.
sure.
It's got some wear and tear. It's not brand new.
Right.
So the insurance company, they're not going to give you the full $10,000 to replace your 10-year-old roof.
Right.
They're going to take into account that depreciation.
Oh, okay.
How much the roof has lost value over time. So they'll determine what the actual cash value is, which will be something less than that $10,000.
Interesting.
That's where the actual cash value comes in.
So could you potentially end up only getting, $6,000 or $7,000 for your roof?
Absolutely, yeah. Depending on the age, the condition, all those things factor in.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a big difference.
That is really good to know up front.
Yeah.
Because,
Before you have to file a claim.
you assume that you have, whatever your dwelling coverage is.
Right, exactly.
That they're going to pay up to that amount.
Right. You think you're covered?
But you have to subtract depreciation from that.
Yeah, for a lot of those things, especially when we're talking about, roofs, appliances, things like that, that have a lifespan.
Right. That makes
If they
sense.
factor that in.
Okay, so then let's talk about what's actually covered.
Yeah.
Because
Just into the details there.
we've got a policy here from American Modern Home Insurance Company.
Right.
And like most policies,
Yeah.
they break it down into these categories, like
Yeah.
coverage A and coverage B and coverage C.
The classics, the ABCs of insurance.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, why can't they be a little more creative with the names?
Right. You'd think they could come up with something a little more exciting than A, B, and C.
Yeah.
But, it gets the job done.
It does.
It's simple, straightforward.
But what I found interesting
Yeah.
was how specific
Oh, yes.
they got
Yeah.
about what is and is not covered.
Oh, absolutely.
We've all heard about,
Yeah.
the dog breed thing.
Right. Certain breeds are considered higher risk.
But this American Modern policy,
Mm-hmm.
it even excludes things like aircraft damage.
Oh, wow. Really?
Like, I'm not talking about your kids,
Right. Not a toy airplane.
toy airplane running into the house.
Yeah. An actual aircraft.
An actual aircraft crashing into your house.
Oh.
What are the chances?
You would hope those are very slim.
All right.
But hey, you never know, right? It's
Yep.
good to know what you're covered for
I guess so.
and what you're not.
Okay.
Better safe than sorry.
And then speaking of, not expecting,
Yeah.
they get really into the nitty-gritty of perils insured against. So, what does that actually mean?
So that's basically their fancy way of saying these are the specific events that we will cover. It's like a laundry list of potential disasters.
So it's not just all-encompassing. It's like it has to be one of these specific things.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they can get very specific, which is, I think, where it gets interesting and sometimes a little bit confusing for people.
Well, and especially here in Texas,
Yes.
where we have, crazy
Right.
weather.
We've got it all, don't we?
We have everything.
Hail, wind, floods, you name it.
So how do these perils, I guess, interact?
Right. Well, so for example, let's talk about that hailstorm again.
Okay.
We're in Texas. It's going to come up.
Always.
So you've got hail damage to your roof, right?
Yes.
And then because of that hail damage, rain gets in and causes damage inside your house. So the hail damage itself, that's a covered peril.
Right.
The rain damage that comes as a direct result of that,
Okay.
that's likely going to be covered as well.
Okay.
Because it's all part of that same event,
Got
that
it.
chain of events.
So it's like a domino effect. It's like,
Yes.
if this, then this, then this.
Precisely.
Right.
But, if that rain got in because you had a pre-existing leak in your roof
Oh, okay.
that wasn't caused by the hail,
Right.
then that might be a different story.
Okay, so that's where the details really matter.
Exactly.
They're not kidding when they say, like, read the fine print.
Read the fine print and then read it again.
Right.
Because you might think, oh, well, rain damage, I'm covered.
Right.
But it's not always that simple.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
There are nuances.
That is super helpful.
Good.
Speaking of nuances.
Yes.
Windstorms.
Ah, yes.
Another Texas.
The Texas classic.
Classic, right.
We know wind.
We're very familiar with
Hi.
wind here in Texas.
Absolutely.
And these policies know it too.
Oh, yeah. They definitely account for that.
Really?
Because we're not talking about just a gentle breeze here.
Right.
We're talking about, possible hurricane force winds.
Right, yeah.
So they have to be prepared for that.
So, like, this Wellington guidelines, they actually have a whole section on Texas windstorm coverage.
It's that important.
Yeah.
It deserves its own section.
They even have, like, a separate deductible
Oh, really?
for named windstorms,
Wow.
which is essentially a hurricane.
Okay, so it has to be officially designated as a hurricane by, the National Hurricane Center.
Okay.
They're not messing around here. It's not just your average windy day.
Okay, so if my neighbor's trampoline
Mm-hmm.
ends up in my yard because we had a, cold front come through,
Right, right.
that's not a named windstorm.
Probably not, no, unless the National Hurricane Center says otherwise.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
But if a hurricane rolls through, you're going to be glad you have that separate coverage because those deductibles can be pretty hefty.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's all about, being prepared for those worst case scenarios.
So, okay, we're starting to get a handle on the coverage itself.
Okay.
But what happens when something actually happens?
Right.
When you need to file a claim,
That's when it gets real, right?
what's that process like?
Well, this is where I think those often overlooked sections in your policy, like the conditions section.
Oh, conditions.
Yeah.
Nobody reads those.
They're important, though.
I know.
They are. They're really important because they spell out a lot of the details of what you need to do, what the insurance company's responsibilities are. It's all in there.
Okay, so let's say, like, a tree falls on my house,
Okay. Classic example.
which, thankfully, usually covered under these policies.
Right. Typically, yeah.
What are my first steps?
Okay. So first and foremost,
Yeah.
you need to notify the insurance company or your agent
Okay.
as soon as possible.
Right.
Like, don't wait around. Don't hesitate. As soon as it's safe to do so, obviously.
Right, right. Okay.
If there's a storm raging,
Storm's still going on.
don't go running out in the middle of it.
Right, don't put yourself in harm's way.
Exactly. But as soon as it's safe,
Okay.
get in touch with them, let them know what's going on.
Okay.
And then, just as important, you need to take reasonable steps to prevent further damage.
Okay.
So if there's a hole in your roof from that fallen tree,
Yeah.
cover it with a tarp if you can, just try to mitigate the damage as much as possible.
Okay.
And of course, document everything.
Okay.
Take pictures, videos, if you can, keep receipts of any temporary repairs you make.
That's basically document, document, document.
Absolutely, because you want to be able to support that claim.
That makes sense.
The more evidence you have, the better.
Right, okay.
So yeah, those are kind of your first steps after a loss. But then this is where it gets, it can get a little bit tricky. And that's where that appraisal process comes in.
Okay.
So let's say you file your claim.
Yeah.
The insurance company, they do their investigation. They come back with an estimate for the repairs.
Okay.
But you don't agree with their assessment.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, this is where it can get a little sticky.
So what happens if you think they're lowballing you?
Right. If you're miles apart on what those repairs should cost,
Yeah.
that's where the appraisal process comes in.
Okay.
So either you or the insurance company, you can request a formal appraisal.
Gotcha.
And basically what happens is each party selects an independent appraiser.
Okay.
So you get your own appraiser, the insurance company gets their appraisers, and then those two appraisers, they select a third appraiser to act as an umpire.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's kind of like
It's like a panel of
a
experts.
jury of your peers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh,
And their decision, or at least the decision of any two out of the three of them,
yeah.
is binding.
Binding. So no takebacks.
No takebacks, no do-overs. Once that decision is made, both you and the insurance company have to accept it.
Okay, so that is serious business.
It is serious business,
Yeah.
and it's designed to be a fair
Right.
and impartial way to resolve these kinds of disputes.
Gotcha.
So that's a big one
That's good to know.
to be aware of.
All right, well, this is all incredibly helpful, but we are just getting started here.
Oh, yeah, we've got much more to uncover.
We're just scratching the surface of this wild world
It's a wild world.
of insurance. So we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more insights
More to come.
from the depths of these documents.
Stay tuned. That appraisal process can be a lifesaver, though,
Right.
because it can be really easy to feel like, you're at the mercy of the insurance company,
Totally.
especially when you're dealing with a stressful situation.
For sure.
You've had damage to your home. It can be really overwhelming.
Right.
So just remember, you have rights as a policyholder. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Ask questions.
Yeah. Knowledge is power.
Exactly.
All right. So speaking of things that you might not expect to find in these policies,
Okay.
the American Modern Policy has this whole section about concealment or fraud.
Oh, right.
It's like they're reminding you to be honest.
Honesty is the best policy, literally, in this case.
Literally.
Because, if you misrepresent any facts on your application, even if it's unintentional, that can have serious consequences.
Okay, so no fibbing about that cracked window you've been meaning to fix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they can deny your claim or even cancel your policy if they find out that you weren't completely truthful.
Gotcha.
So it's important to be thorough and accurate when you're filling out those applications.
Okay, so we talked about duties after loss.
Yeah.
Like, what are some specific things that policyholders need to be aware of in terms of,
Sure.
their responsibilities?
So, like we talked about before, one of the big ones is protecting your property from further damage
Okay.
after a loss.
Okay.
So if that tree falls on your house,
Yeah.
you can't just leave it there and hope for the best.
Okay.
You need to take reasonable steps to prevent things from getting worse.
Right.
Like we said, cover it with a tarp, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And then, of course, you need to cooperate with the insurance company's investigation.
Okay.
Provide them with any documentation that they need, give them access to your property to assess the damage.
Right. It's a two-way street.
Exactly. It's a partnership.
Right.
They're there to help you, but you got to hold up your end of the bargain, too.
That makes sense.
Right.
Okay.
It's all about communication and cooperation.
Speaking of interesting scenarios, there's this whole section in here about recovered property.
Oh, interesting.
So, like, what if my prized antique lamp collection gets stolen?
Right.
The insurance company pays me for the loss.
Uh-huh.
But then, miraculously, the police recover my lamps.
Wow, what a happy ending.
Right.
Right.
What happens then?
So in that case, you actually have some options, according to this policy.
Okay.
You can either keep the recovered property and the insurance money,
Okay.
but they'll adjust your payout
Okay.
to account for the value of the recovered items.
Got it.
So you wouldn't get to double dip
Okay.
and keep both the full payout and your lamps.
Right.
But you could also choose to return the recovered property to the insurance company,
Okay.
and then you would keep the full amount of the initial loss payment.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you kind of get to choose what works best for you.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's like an insurance do-over.
I like it.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about dog breeds.
Yeah.
We've talked about aircraft damage. Let's talk about some of these other exclusions
Okay.
that can really trip people up.
Yeah, because there are quite a few
There are,
that people might not be aware of.
like, earth movement.
Ah, yes. Earth movement. That's a big one.
What does that even mean?
It sounds pretty broad, right?
Yeah.
And it basically refers to damage caused by things like earthquakes,
Oh, okay.
landslides, sinkholes, that kind of thing.
Sinkholes. Yikes.
Yeah, not good.
That's scary.
No, those are not fun.
No.
And unfortunately, damage from those types of events is generally not covered under a standard policy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so if you live in an area that's prone to earthquakes or you're concerned about sinkholes,
Yeah.
you might need to look into getting a separate policy or endorsement.
Wow. Okay, good to know.
Yeah, not all policies are created equal.
All right, so another one that I thought was really interesting was power failure.
Oh, yeah.
So if, let's say, a storm knocks out the power lines and my fridge full of perfectly good food spoils, they're not going to cover that.
So generally speaking, no
Gotcha.
power failures that occur off the described location.
Off the described location, meaning...
Away from your property.
Got it.
So if it's like a widespread outage
Right.
that's not directly caused by something on your property, then that's probably not going to be covered.
So it's all about location, location, location.
Exactly.
Even when it comes to power outages.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
But there is a nuance here.
Okay.
The American Modern Policy does say that if the power failure is a direct result of a covered peril,
Okay.
like let's say a fire.
Okay, so the power outage caused my electrical system to overload
Exactly, yeah.
and start a fire.
Then the damage from the fire would likely be covered,
Okay.
but probably not the spoiled food in your fridge.
Okay, so it's not a total blackout on power failure coverage.
Right. There are exceptions.
Okay, good to know.
But it's definitely a good reminder to have a plan for those inevitable Texas power outages.
Right.
Maybe invest in a backup generator, or at least keep a stash of non-perishable snacks on hand.
Right, some trail mix.
Exactly.
All right, let's circle back to windstorm coverage for a second,
Okay.
because we talked about that separate named windstorm deductible.
Right.
But what else do we need to know about how these policies handle Texas weather?
Well, remember those Wellington underwriting guidelines?
Yeah.
They had that whole section on Texas windstorm coverage,
Right.
and they get into some pretty specific details.
Okay.
Like, for instance, they mention a windstorm, hurricane, and hail exclusion agreement.
Oh, wow, okay.
That's a mouthful, right?
Yeah.
But it's basically a mandatory agreement
Oh.
for properties that are eligible for coverage through the Texas Windstorm Insurance Association,
Okay.
or TWIA.
TWIA.
Okay, yeah, you familiar with TWIA?
Vaguely.
Okay, so they handle wind and hail coverage
Okay.
for coastal properties.
Got it. Okay.
Essentially, it's for those high-risk areas where standard homeowners insurance
Right.
might not offer windstorm coverage.
Right.
So if your property qualifies for TWIA coverage,
Yeah.
your regular policy wouldn't cover windstorm, hurricane, or hail damage.
Oh, wow. So it's like a carve out for windstorm coverage.
Exactly, yeah,
Okay.
because it's such a specialized
Right.
high-risk type of coverage.
Gotcha.
And then they also have this interesting option called a specified building exclusion.
Specified building exclusion.
Yeah, and basically what that allows the insurance company to do
Yeah.
is to exclude coverage for specific buildings on your property
Okay.
that might be, in poor condition or don't meet their underwriting guidelines.
So if I've got like a dilapidated old shed in my backyard,
Exactly.
they're like, we're not touching that.
You will insure your house, but that shed's on its own.
Okay, got it.
So it's something to be aware of, especially if you have older or outbuildings on your property.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about wind and hail. But what about another Texas-sized concern? Mold.
Oh, yes, mold, the silent but deadly,
Right.
or at least damaging enemy.
Right.
We've got the humidity here, we've got the occasional flood.
Right.
Mold can be a major issue.
So how do these policies handle mold damage?
So both the American Modern Policy and the Wellington Guidelines, they have exclusions related to mold.
Okay.
They generally won't cover damage caused by mold, mildew, or other types of fungi.
Okay.
Unless, and this is key, unless that mold growth was a direct result of a covered peril.
Okay, so if a pipe bursts in my house,
Right.
causes water damage that leads to mold, I'd probably be covered.
You'd likely be covered for the mold cleanup because that burst pipe, the covered peril,
Okay.
was the initial cause. But if mold develops over time due to poor ventilation or high humidity, that's probably not going to be covered.
So it's all about finding that root cause.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it goes back to that chain of events concept.
Right.
The covered peril have to be the culprit
Uh-huh.
for that mold damage to be covered.
This is all such valuable information.
Good.
I feel like we're really getting a sense of how much detail is packed into these insurance documents.
Oh, yeah, we're just scratching the surface.
Right.
There's so much more in here.
And we're not done yet, but we are going to take another quick break.
All right, sounds good.
We'll be right back with the final part of our deep dive into insurance jargon.
Stay tuned.
Okay, so we have gone over so much
So much information.
about all this insurance stuff.
Yeah.
But before we wrap this up,
Okay.
I'm curious,
Yeah.
you hear these things sometimes. Like, are there really policies out there
Yeah.
that cover like alien abductions?
Right.
Like, is that a thing?
I mean, there's insurance for just about everything.
Okay.
These particular documents
Yeah.
don't mention anything about extraterrestrial coverage. But I will say that's one of the fascinating things about the insurance world is how specialized it can get.
Okay.
There are policies for, like you said, just about anything you can imagine.
Interesting.
So it's really important to, not just assume that you're
Okay.
covered for something. You got to
Right.
really dig into the specifics of what your policy covers and what it doesn't,
That's a good point.
because you might be surprised
Okay.
by what's in there.
All right. So speaking of specifics, the Wellington Guidelines, they have this whole section about binding restrictions.
Okay.
So what exactly does that mean?
So basically, these are the rules around when a policy can actually go into effect.
Got it.
So it dictates, the terms of the agreement,
Okay.
when it starts, when it ends, all that good stuff.
Okay. And so, like, how could that impact me as a consumer, as a homeowner?
Sure. So, for example, there's a provision in here about um, hurricane or tropical storm alert.
Okay.
So if there's a hurricane brewing in the Gulf, they'll actually temporarily stop
Really?
issuing new policies
Wow.
or increasing coverage on existing policies until the storm passes.
So you can't just, like, wait until the last minute.
Right. You can't just...
If you see a hurricane coming.
Right. Exactly. You can't just decide, oh, there's a hurricane coming, I better get insurance.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
That makes sense, though, because
It's all about risk.
everyone would be trying to do that
Exactly.
at the last minute.
It would be chaos.
Yeah. Okay.
So they have to have these rules in place to manage that.
Gotcha. And it's not just hurricanes.
No, they have a similar provision for like severe weather alerts.
Okay.
So if there's a major hailstorm headed your way,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to, up your coverage at the last minute.
Okay, so be prepared.
Be proactive
Exactly.
way ahead of time.
Don't wait till disaster's, knocking at your door
Right.
to get your insurance in order.
Especially here in Texas,
Especially in Texas.
where the weather can change like that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we talked about what's covered, what's not covered, when you can actually get covered.
Right.
But what about,
Yeah.
how you pay for it?
Right. The important question.
Yeah.
The Wellington guidelines, they actually outline
Yeah.
different payment options, which is something that I think a lot of people aren't aware of.
Okay, so what are my options?
So you can always, pay the whole premium up front if you've got that cash on hand.
Right.
But they also have what's called a mortgage bill option,
Okay.
where they actually bill your mortgage lender directly.
Got it.
And then, you pay it through your mortgage payment.
Okay, that's convenient.
Right. Makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And then they even offer installment plans.
Okay.
So you can pay in smaller increments
Oh, that's great.
throughout the year.
Oh.
So they try to make it a little bit more manageable for people.
That's really good to know.
Yeah, and then of course they've got options for automatic payments,
Right.
online payments, all that good stuff.
Make it easy.
Exactly. Make it as easy as possible.
Well, this has been incredibly enlightening.
Good.
We have decoded the jargon.
We did it.
We navigated the exclusions.
We faced our fears.
We even, figured out this whole
We dove in
windstorm coverage and payment options.
head first, just like we said.
I feel like we are now experts in Texas dwelling insurance,
I would say so.
at least more so than we were before.
We're well on our way.
But most importantly, I hope our listeners feel that way too.
Yes, absolutely. That's the goal.
Because knowledge is power, especially
right.
when it comes to something as important as,
Protecting your home.
protecting your home.
Your biggest asset for most people. So you
Yeah.
want to make sure it's protected.
And we've said it before, but we'll say it again.
Say it loud.
Read your policies.
Yes.
Don't let them just sit there gathering dust.
They're not just for decoration.
Right.
Read them, understand them, ask your agent questions if you need to.
And if there's anything that you should take away from this whole thing, it's that
Knowledge is power.
knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, on that note,
Okay.
we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of insurance.
It's been a wild ride.
It has been a wild ride.
But we made it.
We made it out.
We're still standing.
Hopefully, our listeners got some good information out of this.
And had some fun along the
And
way.
had a little fun.
Right.
So, until next time,
Stay curious.
stay curious
And stay covered.
and stay covered, everyone.